Good evening, Young Kings. Time for your more motivation. Gonna decided gonna bring a conclusion to this divorce um, review of this case. So this is probably my last video going over the case. Um, Talking with my counselor today, I realized there's a need for a transition and stop looking so much in my rearview mirror about what's happened to me and look into my windshield as far as what's out there and available to me. Um, it's apparent that this marriage is is over, and come to a point where I need to start accepting the reality of that, regardless of who's wrong, who's right. And I think there's an element where we both had periods where we did things that was less than conducive to a healthy relationship. So I'm going to conclude this case. But before I get into the case, I just want to send a shout out to some true friends that, it's good, young kings, to build um, lifelong friendships with strong men that could uplift you, that can encourage you. So over this last weekend, I had, 5 friends fly out. Um, and just came for like moral support through this season of my life. So, Eric, Jason, Cam, they all flew from Texas. LB, who's Jason's brother, he came in from Chicago, and then the guy Bacon from California came out from California, and we all just kind of sat down and talked and had some good conversation and some good times together. Um, what's so important about that is like these friendships, especially with Eric and Cam, we go back to 95 at our first duty station, and we just kind of stayed in touch and kind of built each other up, and then we each added different other friends onto that bond and continued to grow. Um, but each of them have went through this process before, some more than others. I won't call on any names, Cam. I won't say that you've been divorced multiple times, but others have been through it before, and to see them on the other edge of this and how they're able to still thrive in life and have learned a lot through that process, and then been willing enough to impart into me some of the things that I can expect to happen, some of the things that has happened to them. And I know each case is uniquely different, but just hearing that perspective from friends who genuinely have your best interest in mind. And I say that because this friendship is so strong that we actually tell each other we love each other when we depart, and it's not an awkward thing to do that. That love is there, and that genuine concern for each other's well-being. So there's been plenty of times that I'll just receive a text and say, "Hey man, how you doing?" Or receive a call, just checking on you, see how you doing. And it's amazing, like those friendships. They're abroad. They're in Dallas and in Austin and various different parts of Texas and out in California. But the beautiful thing about it is like once we get together, we've done a few Zoom calls and a few group calls, and it's just like when someone has an issue for us to sit down and digest and go through that. So that is kind of your motivation, is build those friendships. Um, you need to build them now because um, when you get into a moment like this, it's a tendency for you to isolate yourself and feel like there's no one there, that no one's understanding you. So you need to build friendships during the good times that will be able to sustain you through the bad times. But just as you need to be sustained, you need to be able to reach out to somebody else when they're in times of trouble and stuff of that nature. So it's like iron sharpening iron. Everybody's not going to be strong all the time. Everybody needs someone. So we bounce ideas off each other. We bounce struggles. Hey, I was thinking about doing this, and we hold each other accountable to as much extent as possible. We're all hard headed in a way. We receive the information, and then we dissect it and see how we're going to apply different things to our scenario. So, um, as I was mentioning earlier, like this will probably be my last time going through this case because Michigan is a no fault state, and I'll get into the defense of some of these things as we actually get into the court system. I'll take my lawyer with me. We'll go through and we'll dissect those things. Um, I just wanted to be transparent through this process. Like, um, this is a hard process. It's harder than I thought it would be. Even though the marriage is not quite what I want it to be, there's an element of me that still misses that, that's, structure, regardless if it was the foundation was cracked and wobbly. Um, it's my family still, and with it coming up to the holiday season, I'm mindful of that as well. So I just got to make sure that I don't dwell on things that are no longer available or in my future. That I don't let my past hold hostage my happiness for tomorrow. So I'm going to change gears. I'm not sure what the next series is going to be called, but I still will be going through the divorce process, but I'm not going to give it that much energy anymore. I think this energy now is going to be invested in my new life and trying to become healthier, not only from a physical perspective, a relationship perspective, a wellness perspective, a mental perspective. It's just across the board looking for health and wellness, and that's what I was thinking about today. It's like um, it doesn't happen by accident. Like it has to be an intentional thing. So a part of me at times in this phase, I get lazy and I just want to just sit down and relax and don't do anything. But sometimes that's the worst thing you can do. Like be passive, and that's what a lesson learned that I have to apply from my past is I was very passive in relationships before, and now even though because it takes energy, it takes effort to have a good relationship, and sometimes I exerted all my energy at work, working out and things outside the home that when I finally got home, I didn't really want to do anything. So just got to be mindful of that to be balanced in that. So we'll go through this case just real briefly, and then I'm going to make that seamless transition into something else because there's some things that came across my purview over the last week or so that I know it's a time for a shift to happen. So that shift will happen. And I'm not even sure. I'm going to read this one part on here. It says at the base of marital relationship. Now, this is back to the Kretzschmar versus Kretzschmar case. The husband is divorcing the wife, and they're going through. This is the foundation of the case that was built for the divorce that the wife is seeking. So this part, it says at the base of the marital relationship is the willingness for the parties to live together. If they are unwilling to do so for whatever reason or whoever is at fault, the marital relationship is in fact terminated. So in reality of it is like ours is terminated. Like we're not living together and have not lived together. So that is the breakdown of the marital relationship. Um, and if this is truly to the extent, I guess we were terminated right after we got married when the refusal to live with me for the first 5 years. So that was really the termination of the marriage. If they're unwilling for whatever reason, whoever's at fault, the marriage is in effect terminated. The object of matrimony have been destroyed. They are unwilling to live together, need to be no interest of the law, withstanding its concerns to the parties and sociological significance. So that's not the court's reason. That's why Michigan's a no fault state. Like she doesn't want to be with me. She doesn't have to explain. She just says, "Hey, I'm done," and that has been decided. It is enough under the law that the marital relationship is in fact terminated. Nor does the law require both parties to subscribe to the conclusion that they are unwilling to live together. If either party is convinced that it is so and acts accordingly, it becomes a fact that the marital relationship has been terminated. Meaning, like, if she decides that and her actions indicate that, then that means 1 plus 1 equals 2. Like she decided that, her actions indicated that equals termination. So simple math on there. So there's no question on there. We have reviewed the records and have detailed some unfortunate facts of this case. So this is where it gets tricky at, because although they say there's no interest of the court, they re-interjected based off things that they heard about the things that took place during this marriage, and that's why I said this case here is a character assassination on me. If you haven't seen the previous videos, go back and watch them. There's allegations of drunkenness. There's allegations of physical abuse. There's allegations of just running off and not, coming home. All those different allegations, and they're repeated as far as being lazy, being indolent, being a sharpie, and all those things are things that are indicated in here. So they're saying like it's no business of the court if someone wants out of the divorce, but then they say, hey, they have some unfortunate facts in this case. So like, hey, we got some additional information. Let us consider this. So that's why I'm going to be interested. And then it says the evidence depicts a history of bitter accusations, lack of respect, physical violence, and insensitivity, and protracted separation, and reveals a husband who will not return to his wife under any circumstances. So that is what they're basing. They say, hey, hold up, we know it's not our fault, but look, I know you went out, but you didn't had a history of bitter accusations. You got a lack of respect, physical violence, insensitivity, and protracted separation, and reveals a husband who will not return to his wife under any circumstance, and a wife who denies any personal responsibility for the failure of the marriage. So they make it seem like it's one-sided. And in the words of the great philosopher Rob Bass, it takes two to make a thing go right. But it also takes two to make it go wrong. So the thing about this is like the accusation is one-sided. It says the husband lacked respect, physical violence, insensitivity, protracted separation, and reveals a husband who will not return to his wife under any circumstances. And the wife denies any personal responsibility for the failure of the marriage. So that's not the case. But anyways, both parties concede that there has been a breakdown of the marriage relationship to the extent that the objects of matrimony has been destroyed. In addition, the records contain overwhelming evidence that there's no reasonable likelihood that the marriage of these parties can be preserved. The trial court, instead of applying the proper statutory citation, reasonable likelihood, erroneously utilized the standard of possibility that the marriage could be preserved. So I guess before they say, hey, as we read earlier, they said, let them work it out. The court said that. And then they came back and they said, no, we were wrong. We erroneously thought that y'all could work it out. This is not going to work. So the next question arises, just continue on the issue. What criteria should the trial court consider in granting relief to the parties? All right. The question next arises as to which factors the trial judge should take into account in determining the other aspects of this case, such as custody, support, alimony, property settlement, has enacted of 1971 PA 75 altered criteria for consideration of adjudicating over issues in a divorce proceeding, specifically in the conduct of the parties' relevant factors. So it's saying they're going to take the character and their conduct into account. Let's see. An Iowa Supreme Court examines 287. What if any consideration, fault of the spouse, is given to awarding property settlement, alimony, support to payments under revision statute? The court noted the divorce studies law in Iowa it says in Iowa, we're in Michigan, had its original report proposed that all evidence should be permitted in determining marital breakdown, and had specified 9 separate fault criteria. The Iowa legislature, however, rejected recommendations instead of elimination all at fault grounds based on this legislation history. So he says, hey, although there's no fault, we're going to allow this to be a fault. So that no fault is kind of delusional. There's actually, when it comes to providing support, they're going to try to associate fault on this. As pointing out, our determination is that the legislation purpose in enacting Chapter 1266 was to eliminate fault grounds as the standard for granting dissolution of the marriage was arrived by taking into account the circumstances in which legislator adopted 1266. In that portion of divorce studies, setting forth the kinds of evidence permitted in determining marital breakdowns and adopting the act. And then it goes in order to carry out this obvious legislation, intent is to give effect to the object sought to be accomplished. We hold not only the guilty party contempt must be eliminated, but evidence to the conduct of the parties insofar as intends to place fault for the marriage breakdown on either spouse must also be rejected as a factor in awarding settlement and allowance for alimony. So it looks like they rejected it. It says, let me go back and read that again because I kind of stumbled on there. In order to carry out this obvious legislation intent and give effect to the object sought to be accomplished, we hold not. So hold not. So only the guilty party concept, but must be eliminated, but evidence of the conduct of the parties insofar as to it tends to place fault for the marriage breakdown on either spouse must also be rejected as a factor in awarding property settlement and allowance for alimony or support money. Divorce, let me go back and that jump on there. Unlikely in the holding in Williams, analysts of MCL 552.23, MSA 25.103, in context the 1971 288 PA 75 compels the conclusion that although the Michigan legislature revised the conceptual basis of granting divorce, is not intended to modify the traditional grounds for determining custody, support, or alimony. So I guess we'll have to go through it, and I'm going to conclude on there. Just coming up on 17 minutes. That is, there's more that goes into there, but in essence, it went back and said they were going to hold fault, and then it said they were rejecting no fault. So pretty much, I'm going to have my lawyer get with her lawyer, and we'll figure out what's amicable for both, and just go on and pay and just trying to move forward with that. So to let you know, I am signing the receipt of this, and I'll return. I had 21 days, and I think it's going on about 14 of them. So I'm going to sign that. So you sign in your own paper. All right. That'll receive it, and I'll get that in the mail. Have my lawyer mail that out tomorrow. But now, transition, because I think it's imperative to learn. I was listening to Life Jennings, had this song "Learn from This," and that's what I really need to do is learn from this, because I still have this innate desire to be healthy and whole and have a healthy relationship. So I think that's critical. And I was reading this quote online, and it said, and it spoke to me, and it said, God would never allow what you lost to be the best thing that ever happened to you. So I will repeat that. It says, God would never allow the thing you lost to be the best thing that ever happened to you. Meaning, like, when something departs your life, that's opening up opportunity for you to be able to move forward. But you got to be willing to do that. And I can admit that this thing kind of shocked me for a while. It kind of got me off my rocker and kind of like, hey, man, I want this thing to work out. This is my family. I want this to be whole. And I felt myself chasing something that didn't want to be caught. I felt myself seeking something that didn't want to be found. I felt myself trying to do things, and just through acts of kindness, through showering with gifts and, words of affection, and just like all avenues to me have been blocked. Meaning, like, she never turned down the acts of kindness or the gifts and stuff, but she turned down any attempts for reconciliation. So that let me know, and my counselor, she's reiterating to this. It's like, hey, you're just putting yourself out there to be used more. Like, there's no hope for reconciliation on this. When somebody tell you that they're done, believe them. Don't continue to chase that. You have, and she says you're a good man. You got good value, and somebody will appreciate that. So there's another quote that I read. It says, "When God gives you a new beginning, don't repeat the old mistakes." So there's an element of me that still has to grow and has to mature, um, irregardless of what happens in this divorce proceedings. There's an element of me that still has to overcome and become better. So I don't bring in the things that I had in an old relationship into the new relationships. So the transition, and I'm gonna hurry up because the NBA draft about to come on. But anyways, um, in Ecclesiastes 7, I'm gonna start at um, I'll start at 9, 7, 9. Um, Do not be eager in your heart to be angry. And that spoke because I know when I started this process, as I was going through a lot of the stuff that I've been through, I felt myself wondering why I was so so into trying to reserve this marriage. Like, I was eager. Like I was reliving some of the things that have happened throughout this 25 years, and it put me in a space where it's like, wow, I wasn't saying that I was a victim, but at the same time, it wasn't allowing me to say, all right, I'm an overcomer. I have an opportunity to grow. So do not be do not be eager in your heart to be angry, um, because anger resides in the bosom of fools. So I mean, in your anger, it can make you do foolish things. You know, um, watch what you do when you're angry. You know, watch what makes you angry, and it's a element of me that needs to grow. When you get angry at something, that's probably your God complex coming out. Meaning, like, you want the world to conform to who you are and what you're doing. Like, everybody else around is supposed to align with you. And that's not how the world works. It doesn't revolve around you. So, when you get angry, most times you're going to respond foolishly. So, be careful. And this is a lesson that I have to take mental note of when I move forward. Like, be careful what I let anger me and how I respond. So back to that response management. In verse 10, it says, do not say, why is that the former days were better than these? Like, you get talking to people and it's like, man, back in the good old days, we used to do A, B, and C. I mean, back then, it's like, so they talking about something that was former and say, hey, why can't we have those days like this? And there's nothing wrong with having those good memories. But it says, do not say why is it that the former days were better than these? For is it not from wisdom that you ask about this? For wisdom, along with its inheritance, is good, and an advantage to those who see the sun. Meaning, like, yes, those days are good, and it's the sun, S-U-N. And it's an advantage, like, man, you waking up and you can see the sun, you on this side of the grave, this is a good day. Like, any day above ground is a good day. There's people that's in a hospital bed that wish they can have some of the opportunities and privilege of health and wealth that we have, because health is wealth. So you got to be able to be, it's not saying you can't appreciate the good days and that you had before, but I tell you what, today, when you're breathing, should be a better day. You should be striving for today to be a better day. And as I'm reading this just now, I mean, today was a long day. I'm working from home now, so it feels like I'm isolated, and my mind was wandering, coming up to the holiday season and stuff of that nature. Got kind of a byproduct invite over to the wife's house for Thanksgiving, and I don't know that I'm quite ready to engage in that. I probably need to start a new routine and not go over there because although the marriage is dissolved, I'm not sure I'm ready for a friendship to begin because the real talk, I still love that woman. Even though I can't have her, I still have those feelings for her. You don't eradicate that 25 years, and it hasn't even been 25 days. So for me to get these papers, so there's still that learning my new role, that the new process, and desensitizing myself from what I've experienced for 25 years. So it says, um, do not say, why is it that the former days were better than these? For it is not from wisdom that you ask about this. Wisdom, along with its inheritance, is good, and an advantage to those who see the sun. For wisdom is protection, just as money is a protection. But the advantage of knowledge is that wisdom preserves the lives of its possessors. It says, yeah, wisdom and money, wisdom could protect you, money could protect you. But then it's give you that but, an advantage of knowledge, because wisdom is knowledge, that wisdom preserves the lives of its possessors. So money is not going to preserve your life. Like, you ever got paid and it seems like you're working to pay other people? Like, there's sometimes I get paid and it's like, man, after I start paying the bills and I start looking at what's left over, I mean, that's why they say the borrower is slave to the lender. Houses cost money. The lifestyle I live is pretty expensive, and I'm about to start dialing that back some, and be a better steward of my resources. But man, it's like wisdom and knowledge, it preserves the lives of its possessors. So wisdom would tell you, hey, save your money. Be a little wiser with how you are spending your money. But money, and it talks about in scripture, like money and a fool will always part. So I guess I just said that. I got paid and my money went. So I guess I've been foolish with some money. But I'm going to learn to get on the right side of that. Then 13, this is the part that really um, resided with me. It says, consider the work of God. I know back in Job, when Job questioned God and God gave him a statement like, where were you when I created the heavens and the earth? And, did I consult you? I think it's Job 37. One day I may come back and read that to you. But it says, consider the work. And again, in Psalms, it talks about how the earth will review, nature will review God's beauty. Like, you can just look at the sunrise and you can look at the trees and you can look at all that stuff and you can really see God in those things. So it says, consider the work of God who is able to straighten what he has bent. So although this relationship is bent or broken, like God is able to make it straight. And it says, in a day of prosperity, be happy. But in the day of adversity, consider God has made one as well as the other. So it ain't just going to be all good days. Like, God created those. But then those bad days, God is still God. And that adversity as well. So he created both of them. God has made one as well as the other, so that man will not discover anything that will be after him. Like, God's like, hey, I created you in my image. This is it. You are a version of me. A fallen version there be it, albeit. But when you were created in the image of God. So God is saying, like, hey, don't just seek after those happy days. There's times that you will go through a storm, and that's where I'm at right now. I have seen everything during my lifetime of its futility, and there's a righteous man who perishes in his righteousness, and there's a wicked man who prolongs his life in his wickedness. There's a lot of people that say, hey, just live right, the good die young, or stuff like that. And this is what scripture is saying, like, hey, you need to be balanced. It says, a righteous man who perishes in his righteousness, and there's a wicked man who prolongs his life in wickedness. And in verse 16, Ecclesiastes 7:16, it says, do not be excessively righteous, do not be overly wise. Why should you ruin your life? Do not be excessively wicked, and do not be a fool. Why should you die before your time? It is good to grasp one thing and not to let go of another. And the one who fears God comes forth in both of them. So he says, hey, you don't need to be like the Sadducees and Pharisees, and you don't need to be like Judas. He says there's some, the people in the Bible, a lot of people would tell you, would try to be Bible thumpers, and they would tell you, and they'll preach people in the Bible to you, and they'll preach all their strengths. But they won't tell you about the weakness of those men that were drunkards, that were womanizers, that were, Solomon had, 700 wives and 300 concubines, and they say he was the wisest man in the world and the richest. And they won't tell you about David and his adultery. They won't tell you about Moses and his murder and stuff like that. They won't tell you about Noah and his drunkenness, but they will preach their good side to him. And God is like, these men that I'm using in these Bibles were somewhere in between. The people I use as the 12 disciples and the people who were prophets for me, they were not overly righteous, where they were the Sadducees and Pharisees, and they weren't overly wicked, where they were just, cast out and just out seeking sin. They had that balance. They had some good days, they had some bad days, but overall, you need to have balance. Um, and I'll conclude. I know we're just over 30 minutes. Wisdom strengthens a wise man more than 10 rulers. Let me go back. Wisdom strengthens a wise man more than 10 rulers who are in the city. Indeed, there are not a righteous man on earth who continually does good, who never sins. He says, hey, and all that wisdom, there's not perfection. There's not one. I know you may go to a church, obviously you may be listening to it, and you think your pastor is sinless. Mm-mm. This word says, there's not one who is continually does good and who does not sin. So the thing about this is like, I'll wrap this up. Life is for the living. The thing about life, nobody gets out of here alive. So if you listening to this video now, no matter what you're going through, don't be so low in your adversity days and don't be so high in your happy days. It's going to be an organ where things are back and forth. You got to take the blows. You got to be able to go with the flow. And that's where I'm at now. So this is transition happening. I'm not sure what the next series is going to be. I got some time at home to reflect on that. I still am going to go through this divorce, and I may bring up, no, I'm moving forward. I'm not going to continue to dwell on what happened and why it happened. This is something that needs to happen. There needs to be a transition. There needs to be growth. There needs to be a new excitement. And even saying that, I have to convince myself to be excited about this season in my life. Because it's easy to get excited when things are going good. But at the same time, it says when God's giving you a new beginning, don't repeat some of the old mistakes. So I got to learn not to repeat them. So the journey to wholeness, and I'm not sure what the title is going to be, but we'll continue this. But tell you this, young kings, stay wise and enjoy your days today. Enjoy your evening. Go watch the NBA draft, do something, but make it a great evening.